For the past several years, there have been prominent speakers, political commentators calling for some kind of peaceful divorce in this country. And now we have another high-profile individual saying there are alternate realities here. Something's got to change. Just the other day, I did a segment from Cenk Uygur. I was reading an article from him. He's the founder of the Young Turks, co-founder, I believe. And he was saying there are three different versions of reality right now: the establishment, the right, and the left. He was very critical of the populist right. Of course, it's Cenk Uygur. Well, now we have this. Gingrich won't accept Biden as president, says Democrats, Republicans live in alternative worlds. You are correct, good sir. But Cenk is actually more correct in how he brought it up. It's not Democrats and Republicans. Right now on Twitter, the number 3 trend is vote them all out. Vote them all out. Republicans and Democrats, and just gone, all of them. You see, you've got regular people, populists, and you've got political establishment. Republicans are the political establishment just as much as the Democrats are. Now, as I showed you earlier on this morning in my other segment, Republicans actually stood up against this psychotic spending bill, this Omnibus bill. But my friends, I have some good news. Why? In fact, the Democrats have shown us exactly how Donald Trump can still win. Patriots, listen up. In 2 moves, Trump becomes president for 4 more years. It's very simple. First, Trump must veto the omnibus spending bill. I'm not sure if he can. I think the way it would work is that he would veto it, and then they would basically vote again. Now, the amount of people who voted yes on this is a veto-proof majority, so it might just go through no matter. I think Trump can't actually veto it. So I'm kidding, by the way. The point I'm trying to make is, in this bill is so much garbage and bloat and corruption. Basically, you had a bunch of Congress people just crumpling up garbage and tossing it into the bucket. You see, all that had to happen was for one sly Trump-supporting Republican to write a very simple page: Donald Trump won the November 3rd election, and this bill certifies him for another 4 years. And then everybody and all these politicians have been like, I support this. I love how, if you watch my earlier segment, AOC and Josh Hawley, Democrat and Republican, being like, this is terrible. This bill is so awful. I vote yay. Great. That's political willpower. But ultimately, I think the bigger concern is when you have both the left and the right saying vote them all out. What Newt Gingrich is saying is important, but he's missing something more. You see, Newt himself is for a long time, he's been an establishment politician. And with all due respect to him and the likes of any other politician, some are certainly better than others. They're in the machine. They're the establishment. So when Newt is looking at Republicans and Democrats, I got to say, what he's saying should be worrying to you. When we have street level violence between populist left and populist right, then you have street level violence between establishment and populist left, which is the cops and the protest and the far left. Now, the other day we saw in Oregon, right-wing groups protesting. There's windows got smashed up. I don't know who did it. Somebody, one of the right-wing protesters, a patriot protester, conservative, whatever you want to call him, pepper sprayed the cops. When you have all 3 factions fighting in a big circle, well, that's worrying. In a big triangle, right? How about that? But then you see people like Newt Gingrich say Democrats and Republicans are alternative worlds. And that means that split has made it to the top of the establishment. When the establishment crumbles, then there's going to be a fight. It could be a political fight. And I think we're there now with like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. The political fight is then a battle over the remainder of the establishment. That's what we saw with the presidency of Donald Trump. The establishment became weak. The populist right took power and the populist left revolted. The establishment, in panic, sided with the populist left. Now, what happens that the establishment is back in control? The populists are bigger, angrier, and more powerful than ever, and they are going to tear things apart. Figuratively. That's why I bring up the vote them all out. When the right and the left are in alignment against the establishment's in trouble. And I wonder, on January 6th, Trump supporters, patriots, conservatives, Alex Jones, Jones says 10 million people will be in D.C. on January. Okay. Well, I'm also hearing from people I know who are somewhat politically active, but don't really go out much, saying that they're planning on being there. That to me is a sign then I think a lot of people might actually show up. Now, I'm not entirely convinced it's going to be 10 million people, but look, they did an event in D.C. last month or whatever, and it was decently large. It was a couple 100,000 people. This is it. This is Trump's his last electoral stand. I think a lot of people are going to show up. I do. Well, let's read what Newt Gingrich has to say, and then we'll jump back into this omnibus bill, and I'll talk about they jammed into this bill a provision declaring the Belarusian election fraudulent, and that's when I said clearly the system is completely broken, and anybody who wanted Trump to win could have made it happen. But this is what we have. The system in place is broken and corrupted. And you've got people in Congress who are literally voting to approve who knows what. Millions of dollars for Pakistani gender programs. Great. Gingrich says, in an op-ed titled Why I Will Not Accept Joe Biden as President, former House Speaker Gingrich writes that his unwillingness to accept the election results rises from an outrage he says he previously hasn't felt. Gingrich wrote that he'd been asked by a smart friend of mine why he couldn't accept Biden's win over President Trump. Quote, as I thought about it, I realized my anger and fear were not narrowly focused on votes. Gingrich wrote in an op-ed published Monday in the Washington Times. My unwillingness to relax and accept the election grew out of a level of outrage and alienation unlike anything I'd experienced in more than 60 years involvement in public affairs. Gingrich also said the two parties and liberals and conservatives live in alternative worlds. You have more than 74 million voters who supported President Trump despite everything. And given the election mess, the number could easily be significantly higher. The truth is, tens of millions of Americans are deeply alienated and angry. If Mr. Biden governs from the left, he will almost certainly be forced to. That number will grow rapidly, and we will win a massive election in 2022. Yes, I believe he's correct about that, assuming chaos doesn't break out. Joe Biden could be our Buchanan, a feckless and weak politician who leads us into the Civil War. Civil War II, I guess, because Buchanan led us into the first one. Biden defeated Trump in the 2020 election. They say, great, thanks, Hill. I live under a rock, so I didn't know that. They say Trump won the second most popular votes ever. Trump won more votes than any sitting president ever, gaining, what did he gain? Like 12 million votes over 2016. It's unprecedented that Donald Trump was able to gain so many votes and still lose while all down ticket Republicans were winning. And this shows you why Republicans will not accept the results and will not accept Joe Biden as president. They say Gingrich has backed Trump's efforts to challenge the election results, and in the op-ed wrote he does not have any interests in pretending that the current result is legitimate or honorable, calling it a final stroke of a 4-year establishment media power grab. There has been no evidence offered to support that the results of the election were unfair. However, and challenges brought by the Trump campaign and his allies have repeatedly been rejected in court. Rejected, but not denied. What I mean by that is not denied or rejected on the merits, on process. They say culminating a pair of losses at the Supreme Court that now includes 3 Trump nominees. Yes, but my friends, what do you think happens when 74 million people say no? I made a joke yesterday. I love trolling on Twitter, and I love how dumb so many of these resistance Democrats are. The establishment types. And for some reason, I got to tell you, man, maybe it's a low information thing, but leftists, it's kind of crazy to me. I'll put out a tweet, and they'll just say the dumbest things. So here's what I tweeted. I said, I think it's obvious. 80 million votes proves that Joe Biden was being held back by Barack Obama. Could you imagine if the ticket was Biden-Obama? It would have been bigger than ever. Barack Obama getting 69 million votes in 2008. Could you imagine if Joe Biden was on that ticket? It would have been massive. And this is also evidenced by the fact that Donald Trump gained 12 million votes. Imagine if it wasn't a populist like Donald Trump running against Joe Biden. Joe Biden would have clearly won in a massive landslide. Dare I say, Joe Biden is being held back by Barack Obama. And now that he's running on his own, 80 million votes. Obviously, everybody has been begging, and they finally got what they've been asking for, an old white career politician. And so many leftists and establishment Democrats are like, you're so dumb. You really think that? What? Like, are you kidding me, dude? Man, these people can't understand. Like, social cues, I guess. And maybe it has something to do with the school system, the education system. I don't know, man. But I tell you, these people just don't get it. Anyway, here's my point. What happens when you have Donald Trump? He won, I think, like 62 million votes first time around. And Hillary Clinton won 65 million. But Hillary Clinton didn't win in the right places. Donald Trump gained about 12 million new voters. Now, you can call it Trump's fault. You can say Biden didn't really get 80 million. They were votes against Trump. And I think that's fair to a certain degree. So I get it. But it shows you the escalation on both sides is the rising tension of disparate worldviews. Now, I saw something really funny. Jesse Kelly, he's a commentator. He tweeted, a lot of people are talking about wanting a civil war, and they don't understand how bad it will be. And, having to bury your son in a conflict or something like that. And Frank Luntz, the famous pollster, responded with this you, and he linked to an article from The Federalist. It's time for the United States to divorce before things get dangerous by Jesse Kelly, April 10th, 2018. Apparently, Frank, you didn't read the title of the article, which is saying we don't want a civil war, which is funny because Jesse Kelly literally tweeted, we don't want a civil war. But we're at that point. I got to tell you, it's crazier and crazier every day, the disparate worldviews. One thing I pointed out yesterday, you have in California a mass exodus, or was this a couple days ago? There's 844,000 people who have signed a petition calling for a recall of California Governor Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom is an authoritarian crackpot, but people are trying to get him recalled. They need another, I think, 800,000 or so, or 700,000 signatures to trigger a special election. I think it's good they're doing it. I'm not sure it will matter. You know why? At the same time, California is dealing with a mass exodus. People are fleeing the state in greater and greater numbers. Interestingly, there's a negative net migration from Americans and a net positive migration from foreign citizens, which means California is becoming less American citizen and more foreign immigrant. These people who are leaving California are the people you need to sign that petition to get Newsom recalled, but they're going to Texas, Idaho, Wyoming, etc. They're getting out. So what happens in 2 years? Well, Newt Gingrich says there's going to be a massive backlash and Republicans will win. I'm not convinced. I'm not entirely convinced. Red states will become redder and blue states will become bluer, and blue states have more congressional seats because denser population around cities. Not every blue state. Not every red state. Okay, obviously. But what happens then when all of the people who are like, yo, I should be allowed to own a gun? What happens when those people are attacked, oppressed, or threatened by Joe Biden's presidency? What happens when Joe Biden gets what he wants? He wants an assault weapons ban, something that makes literally no sense. If you've done any research on it, and even doing a cursory glance, I can tell you it makes no sense. I understand the general idea of wanting some kind of gun control measures. That I get. You'd be surprised. In some places, it's insanely easy to get guns. All right. You'd think there would be some kind of reasonable approach that Joe Biden or the Democrats would bring about, but they only bring about absurdity and insanity. They tell you certain things are banned for cosmetic reasons. It makes no sense. So I'll tell you a story. So I recently became a gun owner this year, and I was talking to a gun shop owner about a very famous case where a woman from Pennsylvania apparently didn't realize, even though she was permitted to carry a weapon, that she went into New Jersey. She was going to Atlantic City to go gamble. And when she got pulled over, she did the responsible thing as a responsible law-abiding citizen. And when the officer came up to the window, she said, I just wanted to let you know that I am armed. And he said, okay, you're under arrest for a felony possession or whatever. Why would you do this to someone? And that's why people refer to states like New Jersey and a bunch of other states as like the evil seven. Why would you do that to somebody? If you're a cop and you swear an oath to the Constitution and some bumbling 40-something-year-old woman says, I'm just going to meet the girls to gamble in Atlantic City. And then when you're like, ma'am, you see a gun? Why would you be like, well, I'm going to put this woman in prison for years? That makes no sense. Why wouldn't you just be like, ma'am, we have a law in this state. You cannot have a concealed weapon. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to escort you back to the bridge and you need to go back to Pennsylvania because you cannot bring that weapon. What you got to understand about Pennsylvania and New Jersey and New York and New Jersey is that if you live in Philadelphia, New Jersey is basically a suburb. We have no reasonable approach to politics. We have no human approach to politics and justice and law in this country. And that's why I bring this up specifically about the peaceful divorce scenario. When both the populist left and the right want all of Congress gone, we have a problem. And they do. And there's probably a bunch of bumbling non-voters who don't know or don't care, but it doesn't matter. They're not active. They're not the ones who are rising up in the street and actually getting involved. If you abstain from the vote, then I don't think you're a non-participant. I'm not going to say, well, let's see what they think. No. You need to get here and express yourself. But listen, what happens if right now they got rid of every congressperson? That would be a start, I guess. And then we get a whole new wave of people in Congress. And what would they do? Probably the same things. So we have no way to stop this train, which is about to crash into a wall, which is funding things like $10 million for Pakistani gender programs. Take a look at this one from Town Hall. Here's a few things that are in the bill. Climate Security Advisory Council. Let's see, the invasive species assessments, mitigation, and reductions, $130 million. That's amazing. Now people are saying it's the COVID bill. It's the Omnibus spending bill. But I do think it's fair to call it the COVID bill because that's their justification for passing the whole thing. They're worried about water resources on the Tibetan Plateau. That's great. It looks like about $1 million for, what is this? Oh, the Tibetan issues. Wonderful, wonderful. Creating a U.S.-India Gandhi King Development Foundation, $30 million. Assistance for Tibetan refugees. I'm actually not too put out by that. You know what I mean? Tibet, China, yeah, they got issues. The point is, these aren't the worst things I've seen. The $10 million for gender programs in Pakistan certainly is absurd. But the left and the right are both upset about this. The left is upset that the stimulus package isn't enough. But that doesn't work for the people on the right. The left's answer is give everyone more money. The right's answer is open up the economy. If the left and the Democrats want to shut down their economies, fine, they can do it. So long as you allow the red states to do what they want to do as well. And this is where the problem arises. The federal government cannot accurately represent both factions of the culture war as they break apart. That's the establishment, the politicians in Congress. That's the establishment. So they're fumbling. They're falling apart, desperately trying to do something and still doing nothing. I don't think they actually care for the most part. Only a handful of politicians actually said no to this bill. Only 2 Democrats, Rashida Tlaib and Tulsi Gabbard. Good for them. My respect. So what happens then? If we get rid of the federal government, it will go back to the populist battlefront. The left and the right arguing now over what the solution is. Yes, I think Jesse Kelly is correct. Unfortunately, and it's kind of scary, the left wants more government spending, more government control, more government authority. They want everything to be locked down. I had Destiny on the IRL podcast, and he said we need a hard lockdown, a complete and total 2-month stop, and then a stimulus package to make sure everyone gets through that. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. That makes sense. Right now, we have a half-baked approach because we have some partial opening. Some states are open, some are closed. And doing half of both isn't working, I guess. Now, we did, for the most part, have a near total shutdown. I don't think it's going to work. So you know what? He can advocate for that. I'll advocate for reopening the economy and protecting the vulnerable. I'm still in favor of a stimulus package on top of that. We can figure it out. But there's the divide from the left and the right. Why should someone in New York City who lives in a concrete cubicle stacked on top of a bunch of other people in a place that smells like sour milk, why should they dictate what someone in West Virginia is doing? That's the problem. It doesn't work. Cities have become so insanely different from rural areas, it doesn't make sense anymore. So Joe Biden says assault weapons ban of all online sales of accessories and firearm related, items. And it's like, well, why does that make sense? Why does it make sense? If you're concerned that someone in, say, Indiana can buy a gun and bring it to Chicago, then get security when people are coming into Illinois. That's your problem, not banning guns across the entire country or banning guns for people in Indiana. That's what Joe Biden wants to do. So here's the big battle. The Democrats want this country, no matter where you are, no matter who you are, to reflect their image. The Republicans want to be left alone, which leads us to an untenable situation. Republican politicians doing nothing to stop the Democrats saying this is what must be. If you live in New York City, and you got cops on every corner, and you like your cops, and you're okay with everything they're doing, apparently the left isn't because they protest the cops all the time. But if you vote for this and you support it and you don't want guns, then fine, so be it. That's you. To then have these blue locations vote on behalf of red locations saying you can't have guns makes no sense. Culminating in a very famous tweet where someone said, what if when they wanted to ban assault rifles, says, what happens if 30 to 50 feral hogs come onto my property. What do I do? And all of the Democrat leftist types are like, you're so dumb. What are you going to, 50 hogs? What are you crazy? 50 hogs on your property and you need a gun. Yes, feral hogs are a very serious problem. They're massive and they go nuts. I lived in a rural area for some time. It's really, I don't want to say it's a red pill moment necessarily. It's not necessarily red pill, but you really do get a better understanding of the political divide. Let me tell you something. I lived in a rural area. Gunshots just went off near my house because I'm in the middle of nowhere right now. I lived in a rural area. Oh, and it's really funny. City people don't get it because they freak out when they hear gunshots. Like, don't worry, they're on their property doing whatever. I don't care. Anyway, I lived in a rural area, and I was talking to locals. I remember going to a Trump rally, talking to Trump supporters. This was in Florida, and you really start to understand where conservatives are coming from and why they think the things they do. Two things happened. Where I lived, there was a series of home invasions, and some guys apparently broke into someone's house. He was taking a shower or something like that, and when he got out of the shower, he heard a noise. And so he's in his towel, and he goes down the stairs to see what's up, and there's two men, and they look at him, point a gun, and boom, boom, two in his chest. And he died. And everyone heard about it. And it turned out these guys, guess what? Non-citizens. Unauthorized immigrants, illegal immigrants, whatever the PC term is, whatever. And so there you go. Two things that people in the neighborhood started saying. You need to get a gun and protect yourself. And we're concerned about illegal immigration. And then these people show up for a Trump rally, and Trump wins in Florida. People who live in big cities don't see these things and don't hear these stories or just don't care. Maybe they say it doesn't matter if these men are non-citizens, illegally or legally or whatever. Maybe they feel like they could call the police. The problem with where I live down in Florida, we didn't have police. There's like a sheriff maybe. You could call and then they'd be like, we'll be there in 40 minutes. Good luck. Do you have a gun? No. I have more gunshots going off. It's great. At least I know that where I am now, I have a responsibility to myself to take care of my friends, my family, and be responsible. In the city, I understand if you've got cops everywhere. I lived in cities too. It's easy to call the cops. They're there in a minute. When I lived in the Philly area, someone tried to break into my house. Cops were there in a minute. We heard the noise, called the police. They were there. They found the guy. They searched him. Everything was good. Apparently the guy was crazy or whatever, and they let him go or something like that. He came back. The cops showed up a minute later, and that was easy. And even the cops there told me, get a shotgun or something. And I'm like, all right. So you have different situations, and they're different living situations, and they're becoming so much more extreme that the people in the cities keep voting for things at a nationwide level that don't relate to people who live in rural areas, and vice versa. That's why we've always had state rights, but it seems to be because of the internet, it's all going away. People are now arguing on a national level about what's happening to them locally. And so Republicans won't recognize Biden. Democrats don't recognize Trump. Where do you think this leaves us? Yeah, okay. I won't say the words. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up over at youtube.com/Timcast. Let me repeat that. The website address is youtube.com/Timcast. I get a lot of messages from people saying, but I'm on the Timcast channel. I didn't say the channel is named Timcast. Don't ask me why YouTube does this. Just type in youtube.com/Timcast, and I have another channel where you can check out my stuff. So anyway, I'll be there at 4. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.